Welcome to Indigenous Voices. Join us as we speak with Candace Phillips, who's been instrumental in shaping the country's tourism landscape. Our first question: who is Candace Phillips?
It's always tough to describe yourself, but if I had to describe myself, I am simple. Most days I consider myself very simple, nature loving, caring, people oriented kind of person. I'm very big on human connections, so empowering people is something that speaks to the heart of myself and being empowered by others because I feel like our journey is always impacted both ways. It's never one sided. Um, my busy life takes me away from some things I could be doing, but the ability to travel, I think, has really grown me into a better human being. So I am generally someone who is chasing my dreams, living my life as much as possible as a human. Um, Also, being a good mother, I think that's very important for me as well. As my kids grow, I change, I adapt to their ways as well, and really trying to be a good, solid human being.
All right. Tell me, what was your childhood like, and where did you grow up, and that place that made an impact? Tell me a little bit along those lines.
Majority of people, when they think of Candace, or you ask them where Candace is from, they will say Candace is from the Rupununi. But Candace is not from the Rupununi. My ancestry is actually from Region 1, Moruca. So I'm a Lokono, proud Lokono. Unfortunately, I didn't grow up in the community. I moved to Georgetown when I was pretty much a baby. I went back. I fondly remember going back for holidays to see my grandparents who were then alive. And I remember like little things like standing on Mercury Bridge. It looks quite different now, the San Jose
Yes.
Bridge. I remember hearing the shell when they blew it, or when the fish boats would actually come, and then everybody would rush to the landing to buy crab or fish, and just it was quite a different road. There were so many things that were so different about America, Santa Rosa then,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of like one of the things I miss when I go back now because I remember it from that childhood memory that I had. Georgia has greatly impacted my life. There was a time when this was all I knew, just the urban space. But in me, I knew that I also had another part, which I never knew quite, or never really got the opportunity to really explore. And so when I went back for holidays to see my grandparents, that was my moment of kind of connecting to something else. And then when I came back to Georgetown, I think over time, I just found that there was something in me that wanted to know more, wanted to know more about this indigenous life. Because in Georgetown, of course, when everyone looks at you, they're like, well, you gotta know how to make a cassava bread, you gotta know how to paddle the canoe, and all these things. They would ask me, and then I would be none the wiser because we're kind of never did these things, right?
Yeah.
So as I moved on in life, I knew that there was something in me that was calling me to something greater, to understand my culture, my background, maybe why I look like this and why people perceive me a certain way, just to understand a bit more. Because when you grow up in Georgia, I think sometimes you lose sight of your culture and your past,
Yeah.
and you're just there, you're in a different existence.
Yeah.
For me, I think my whole perspective changed when I first got the opportunity to actually travel Guyana.
Okay.
I was already in my 20s, early university years, and I started working with the Amerindian Peoples Association at that
Okay.
time. And the reason why I took that job was really for the same reason. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to understand not only the Lokono culture,
Mhm.
but Guyana and its indigenous peoples and what made it so special. And when I actually started traveling, it's then I had such an awakening. Like that's when I understood, oh well, this is a matipee. This is what you do. For me, it was a total learning.
Yes.
Um, by no means I'm an expert, but I think what has helped me to understand is because I've just immersed myself in it. I've just tried to understand rather than try to project anything else on anyone's culture or any place that I go to.
All
And
right.
so, it's been quite a journey, village by village,
Yeah.
understanding issues at that time. So, why was land important to Indigenous people? Why is it important to Indigenous peoples? Why is there so much worry about it? And how do you make decisions and all of that? And so, those years of working with the organization really did open my eyes a lot to something that from in Georgetown I couldn't see, I couldn't understand. But walking the paths of other leaders and understanding their struggle and why they've projected and trying to protect their land, I think really positioned me in a different stead. Many, many years later, now I can look back and say it was those foundation years that prepared me for this particular path. Because now when I approach my work, it is the very concerns that I'm able to put into that because I understand it from such a different
Yes.
perspective, and I'm really thankful for those early years.
All right. Lovely. Let's talk about a path to travel. Has it dawned on you how big your page is and the impact it's making?
I actually see it as such a small page. I often call it my small project, my small page, honestly.
Wow.
Honestly. Anyone close to me will know that I've said that many, many times over. But that too is a part of Candace, right? I try to
Yes.
be a very humble person, and I never try to forget the part that has led me to certain points in my life. A part of travel, my life changing experiment. I also like to refer to it as that because I could never have imagined that it would be so impactful. Um, and so this journey that began, when it began, I didn't know it would then evolve into art travel. But on one of my journeys to Kaku, Region 7, um, I remember very fondly going up the Kaku River, and it was so serene. There was hardly any boat traffic. The birds were there, the water just flowing, and it was just peaceful.
Wow.
And at that point, I had never had such an experience before.
Wow.
And we went to an area which is like the old settlement or farm area. I'm still learning to pronounce the word, so I try not to butcher it. But I remember standing there, climbing up the hill. It's like it was a farm area, and there were like maybe one or two families that had like a little homestead when they
Okay.
came to the farm there. But on a clear day, if you look in the backyard, you would see Roraima. And
Wow.
then you look on the other side, you see the other mountains, the Kaku River is just flowing there. And you're out there, and there's no one else out there.
Wow.
And as I stood there, I said, it is my dream to travel Guyana. It is my dream to explore and to learn more. Because at
Wow.
that time, I was probably at 1% in terms of understanding the geography of Guyana.
Okay.
And I just put it out there. I fondly look back now and say, Makanaima probably heard me. Um, and so I've kept that dream with me through all the years since I did that visit. Um, my journey to tourism itself was a whole metamorphosis by itself because tourism was nowhere on my radar, nowhere.
Wow.
It just so happened that a few stars aligned and I was given an opportunity, and I had a great group of people who believed in me more than I could have ever seen it. And then I found myself on a tourism path. It's such a story, but I do believe in alignment. Life often brings you right where you need to be,
Yes.
and you just have sometimes you just have to go with it. And even if it seems confusing, you can't understand it at that time. There's gonna
True.
come a time in your life when you're gonna look back and say, well, that had to happen, and this is the only thing that could have come out of it. So fast forward from that point, I started working tourism in the Rupununi, which was also my greatest teacher.
Okay.
I often credit the Rupununi with giving me much more than I can ever give it back, simply because it molded me into the person I am today.
Okay.
And then I returned to Georgetown. Then I started working with the Guyana Tourism Authority as a product development officer. That was like my first beginning outreaches to communities. The first community that I would have worked with in this capacity was Moruca. So, from traveling the country, learning new regions, seeing new communities, at that time, I think I knew I always had a love for photography,
Okay.
or I had a deep interest in photography. Probably had a more cheap phone then. But nevertheless, I mean, sometimes when I look back at those photos, it's like, it's interesting to see where you can begin and where you
Yes.
can find yourself. And
Truly.
so when I think of a path to travel, I firstly think about that. It is that journey. It is a very personal journey for me, coming from when I used to do videos and my hand would be shaking to take a video. Now I have better control, even
Yes.
without a gimbal. Most times I'm able to stabilize my own hand. So, there are things I've been working on.
Yes.
I guess less fuzzy pictures. When I started, I was just on every trip that I went, I just took photos. And there came a point I was like, what am I doing? Because, like, maybe it's something I tried to fight, but I probably think it was fighting me more than I was fighting it. Because I took so many photos, and even on my personal page, I would post them and stuff like that. And I think looking back now, I could even see in that the makings were already there. It was just to put the pieces together. And I think my catalyst really would have been when I had an outreach, and there's this well known photographer, videographer who does amazing work. I can only aspire to reach his level. But I remember sitting with him because I was chaperoning him to the community. And I was like, I really want to do this thing. I have this interest. What should I buy? What camera should I invest in? And he says, you may see me with this camera, but this is what I also use. And he pulled out his mobile phone. And he's like, I often reach for this one quite a lot over this one. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then he said, I think the greatest advice that he's given me is like, learn your angles, take more photos, develop your style. And over time, you will, improve in your techniques, and whoever you're meant to be as a photographer, it will become apparent. He said, when you're finished all that, then you can think about, the fancy camera and leveling up. And he said, for now, you're not in a bad place. You have a phone, use it, learn the techniques. I was like, okay, solid, solid. So
Great advice.
great advice. Um, and then since then, I started taking photos. Like everywhere I go, everything. And I think too, I just didn't depend on fate to lead me down a path. Like online, there's so many resources.
Yes.
So I went behind the scenes on YouTube, kind of looked at it. I was like, okay, this is how you do this as a photographer. These depths of field and this and that. And I was like, oh my gosh. But I recognize that if you want to be good at anything, really, it's a life lesson, right?
Yes.
You have to invest the time and you have
True.
to go after it, even when it seems you're not going to be making a breakthrough. Eventually, the day comes. And so that really has been my photographic journey. It's really been more about trying to take better photos, capture the essence that I want people to see. And out of that, I think my style has more or less morphed into what it is. A friend of mine would usually say, even before I see your watermark, I know you took this photo. And when I look at it, I was like, yeah, it's true. Because
That's
I could
good.
see the similarities in in the photos that I take. Um, and so after having a gallery that is just filled with photos, and then I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Now that I have all of this. And so I was like, I have an opportunity. This life has given me a great opportunity. And I feel like I've been very blessed, very privileged to have the opportunity to discover my own homeland. How many people can actually say that they have that opportunity and they value it, right? Because we all could travel and we could see things completely different.
Yes.
Mine has always been motivated by falling in love with Guyana over and over again, understanding, really understanding what sets one village apart from the other one, or makes this river different from this waterway. And I think for me, that has really shaped my perspective because I've always gone into it with open eyes, like this is what I want to see. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do a page. Because I know on your personal page things get all muddled up and gets
Yes.
lost and stuff happens. So I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? I will do a page that's dedicated to my photography. And I took a while getting there. Probably had some knuckles from my friends like, hey, when you gonna do this thing? I guess for me because I didn't quite believe in it strongly enough.
Okay.
And this is where the people that stand behind you become so important because sometimes they push you and people see much more than you can see sometimes.
Yes.
And so tossed around a few names, trying to figure out this thing, and then I just literally just bit the bullet. I said, you know what? I'm gonna do this thing. I think I was just scared. Honestly, I was scared.
Okay.
I wasn't sure what I was in for. And then I just said, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I remember I keep the first profile photo I did for my page. It was looking back at it now, I was like, Candace, did you really put this thing out here? It was a weird looking Canva design photo. Just to say, I didn't have a logo, I didn't have anything then. It was just the text of how to travel on a photo. And I was like, okay, this humble beginnings. But I keep that to remember where I started when I didn't know anything. Um, and then I was like, okay, just put yourself out there. And that's where I started. Literally just putting one photo out there. All the time behind the scenes, still learning, still being a
Okay.
student,
Yeah.
learning as much as I could, following, taking inspiration from others, whether it be others locally, others internationally. I just looked at how they were doing their presentation, their photos or their angles, and just trying to understand. And I think that has never stopped. I always draw inspiration from different people, and for me, it's always putting your unique spin on that inspiration. And so we have a page called Path to Travel. I realized that I needed to update my logo. I was very lucky that a friend of mine said, hey, I'll work on this thing for you. And we came up with something. That too is a headache, right? Because coming up with
Designs.
logo is like,
Yes.
ooh, you go wrong in circles. But I was like, I was contented with it. And then I remember when I started doing my t-shirts. I've always been big on branding because I believe that you gotta put your brand out there, right? So when I started making my teas, they were literally just for me,
Okay.
right? Just for me to put that brand out there. And then eventually people are like, we really like your t-shirt. I was like, okay. So I knew there was buy-in to this logo. Like again, like I couldn't see it clearly, but other people connected with it. And I was like, okay, it's not broken, don't fix it, leave it. And we've been going good since then. I think for me, it's very humbling to see where my pages come from. Sometimes the comments that I get, sometimes they come at some days where I'm having a tough day. and I will go online, or there'll be a message waiting for me in my inbox. And I just take that moment and I just say, Universe, thank you. I was looking at one this morning. Someone was basically saying that they really love nature, but my page brings it all to life and all of
Yes.
that. And I'm like, yeah, that's what makes it worth it in the end. For me, I know we get so caught up with numbers.
Mhm.
We're always like, oh, you have to meet this, or you have to be 100K to be impactful, or whatever, to be famous, or whatever it is floats people boats these days. But I feel success is what it looks like to you as an individual. If you remember what is your purpose. So my purpose was always to teach people more about Guyana, for people to come with me and see a part that I probably am now discovering, just like you. Sometimes
Yes.
this is the first time I've gone there, and I'm so excited to share that with you. And then there's be somebody who's so receptive and say, you know what,
Mhm.
we didn't know that. Or then somebody from who might have visited 20 years ago will say, this looks so different from my time. And then you're like, oh, yeah. So it's a learning process for me too, right?
Okay.
Um, so apart to travel, being out there, I can see the lives that it has impacted,
Yes.
and that really touches my life. And people say, I look forward to seeing your photos every day, or when I see your photos, it makes my day. That for me is a huge accomplishment, much more than I ever could have imagined that would have come out of it.